The Trump administration is facing questions following an airstrike against a purported drug trafficking boat off the coast of Venezuela on Tuesday. Donald Trump said the so-called kinetic strike killed 11 people who were part of the Venezuelan Tren de Aragua narco gang. But there are questions over what legal authority the administration had to carry out the strike, which would normally have to be approved by Congress. Venezuela, for its part, has accused Washington of planning regime change in Caracas after it amassed 7 warships and 1 submarine in waters around Venezuela. And for more on this, I can welcome Colin Harding, journalist and consultant on Latin America and the Caribbean, and former Latin American editor of The Independent. Good morning, Colin. This action by the Trump administration was highly unusual.
Yes, that's the least that can be said about it. And normally, these are international cooperation operations. I was on board a British warship a few years ago doing anti-drug operations in the Caribbean, and that was done in conjunction with the US Coast Guard. What happened was when a suspicious boat was identified, the US Coast Guard was sent out in a small boat to intercept the vessel to establish who the people were, what was on board, and if necessary to detain them and to confiscate their cargo. That didn't happen at all in this case, as far as we know, because we don't know how the US government established this was a boat operated by the Tren de Aragua, that there were drugs on board, and that it was heading towards the United States. Maybe they did do some intelligence work, but we don't know. And it was just announced that they'd taken this boat out, which is highly unusual.
Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the fact that Donald Trump declared Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists gives the administration the right to carry out this strike. But under US law, this actually has to be approved by Congress. Will they find themselves in a sticky situation here, the Trump administration?
Well, they are having to answer questions. I mean, the president is designated as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and he can, in some circumstances, order a strike, but it's not clear he can order something in international waters in peacetime. So yes, I think this one will run and run. I mean, they do have to, just to say that these were terrorists and they've been designated as such and therefore are legitimate military targets. I think there are questions whether this contravenes international humanitarian law and, of course, the international law of the sea.
Washington says that Venezuela is controlling drug gangs, including Tren de Aragua, and also the purported Cartel de los Soles, which is not actually a group that possibly only exists in the minds of journalists. Are these credible accusations by the Trump administration?
Well, both the Tren de Aragua and the Cartel de los Soles exist, but not as tightly controlled, centralized organization run by one man, the president of the country. They are sort of diffuse networks. And the Tren de Aragua, I mean, Insight Crime, which is an organization which investigates these things, has established that Tren de Aragua's importance and strength, for instance, in the United States has been greatly exaggerated. And it's not an international drug trafficking organization, which is what the Americans claim. They do exist, and there is a lot of drug trafficking going on in Venezuela and from Venezuela, but not these tightly organized and controlled groups, which the US government says are run by the president and his close associates.
Now, Nicolas Maduro says that Washington is planning regime change in Caracas after this positioning of 7 warships and 1 submarine in waters off its coast. Does the Venezuelan president have a point?
Well, the Americans certainly want him to think that, and he called a very unusual international press conference the other day, or media conference, and he looked pretty rattled. I mean, the suggestion that they might try to take him out in some way, either by kidnapping him or something else, that there might be a drone strike. This idea is floating around, and certainly American government sources have suggested that he ought to be very worried indeed. So the pressure on him is clearly being stepped up. But of course, he's using the supposed threat to rally support for himself and mobilizing this citizen militia, which he claims has more than 4 million members. So he's saying this is a threat to the whole of Latin America, and hopes that other Latin American countries will come to his support. And Colombia and to some extent Brazil already have. Other countries have supported the Americans, notably the close neighbours Guyana and Trinidad.
Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in Mexico yesterday, and he actually praised Mexico for its cooperation on drug trafficking. The vast majority of drugs that are smuggled to the United States come via the Pacific, i.e. mainly via Mexico. Why this focus on the Caribbean all of a sudden?
I think to put pressure on Venezuela is one of the objectives. And of course, the drug trafficking routes do change all the time. The trafficking organizations do try to stay, and usually succeed in staying one step ahead of the authorities. And if the focus has been on the Pacific in recent times, which it certainly has, they can always switch back to the Caribbean, which was where the whole thing started. The drug trafficking from Colombia into the Everglades of Florida was way back in the previous century. So these things are very flexible. But clearly at the moment, this is sending a guided missile cruiser and the other warships to sort of lurk off the coast of Venezuela is very much intended to project American power and to possibly give the green light to other Latin American governments to do similar actions against the drug trafficking organizations in their countries.
Thank you very much for that. Colin Harding, journalist and former Latin American editor of The Independent.